I definitely don't claim to be a professional. If you don't know what you're doing, don't try this at home.
Hey everybody, thanks for landing on my YouTube channel. I don't know how you got here, but thanks for landing here. The name of the channel, Random Projects with Danger. I'm Danger. I like to build stuff. I have my own little workshop here. Nothing crazy, nothing too big. It's just a small little workshop with all my tools in it. I like to fabricate. I like to make crazy stuff. So welcome. Let's get going. What's up everybody? Today's project, I've decided to take this old beer keg and make it into a barbecue grill. It's going to be a lot of sanding, many different layers of grit just to get it down to where I can polish it up, hopefully to a mirror finish. Thinking about actually building the burner for this. I could take the guts out of an old grill and put it in here just as easy, probably even easier. But I think I'm going to end up building the burner for this one as well. We'll see how that goes. Let's get going. As you can see, this keg has stripes painted on it. A lot of sanding to get those off. I tried hitting them with some lacquer thinner. Didn't seem to really touch them, so back to sanding. Okay guys, I started with some 120 grit, 120. Seems to be doing a great job. I didn't want to go too much coarser than that because 120 is scratching up the tank pretty good, but it's definitely taking the layer off that I need. Probably going to have to go up to maybe, a 320, 500, 800, and we'll see how far up we go. I may end up hitting this with 2500 right before the final polish, but we'll see. Man, that stuff is on there. When I start hand sanding, I want to go around the barrel like this. When I get up into the finer grits, it probably won't matter because you probably won't see that. But if there is any scratches left over, they'll be going with the grain of the barrel. And I may have a touch of OCD on this, and that's why I do it that way. I'm sure everybody has their own way of doing things, but that's just how I like to do it. Okay, I just finished up with the 120 grit. Got all of the major scratches out that I'm going to be able to get out with the machine and hand sanding. I'm going to switch over now. Go down to a little 220 and repeat the process. Alright guys, I just finished up with the 220 on the sander. I'm going to bring you in close and show you so you can still see all these scratch marks. What we want to do is we want to eliminate as many scratch marks as possible before we start to polish. It's getting there. It's getting there. But you can still see all those swirly scratch marks from the sander. We want to get rid of those. The next step, I'm going to peel off that 220, put some 320 on here, and go to town. So unfortunately, I was out of the 320 grit for the electric sander, so we're doing it by hand. But it looks really good. definitely getting rid of those swirly scratches. It's getting there. Tedious process. Alright, I finally finished up with the 320 grit. Unfortunately, I am also out of 500 grit, so I guess we're going straight to 800. But with the 800, I'm going to wet sand, just so it doesn't clog up the paper. Got my little Harbor Freight sprayer here. Give it some water. Start smoothing out those scratches. Alright guys, I just want to show you the difference here. We come over to this section right here. This is where I left off with the 320 grit. I just came over here to this and wet sanded it with the 800. You can still see the scratches, but they're way finer than this area right here. Also, I just want to point out, this keg is obviously used. It's not going to be perfect, but if I can get a nice shine on it, I think it'll look great. We got the 800 grit all done by hand. The next step in the process for me is 2000. But we're going to do this with a nice foam pad on my buffer. Alright, this is probably going to get messy. Just to warn you, if you're going to use an orbital like this, it's going to spray everywhere. But it's way faster than doing it by hand. This is starting to look really good. We just finished up with the 2000 grit. This thing is gleaming. I am going to switch to some 5000 grit. These Trizac foam discs. Very, very expensive, but in my opinion they're worth it, and I'll tell you why. A friend of mine told me years ago, he explained it to me, that the more scratches you put in the surface, aka the finer grit you go, the more teeny little scratches, they're like facets on a diamond. When you shine them up, they gleam and they shine way brighter. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and do the 5000 grit. Let's get going. As you can see, that 5000 grit really, really makes this thing shine. I just want to give a shout out to my friend Rod for telling me that secret about 20 years ago. He probably doesn't even remember imparting that wisdom to me, but thank you, RW. I'm going to continue on here because this is starting to look awesome. I almost forgot to mention, another reason to do it with the 5000 is because it's literally one step away from polished. The second reason is I'm going to do some welding on this. I'm going to cut it in half and make a grill out of it, put some hinges on it. I'm going to do some welding, and every welder knows you need clean material to weld. So it's a dual purpose, and then just a little bit of polish and this thing will be ready to go. Whew. Well, I'm glad that's done. Almost 4 hours just to get this barrel presentable enough to cut it up. But it looks really good and it's going to polish up nice. So the plan is to cut this directly in half. I'm going to wrap a tape measure around the top, get a measurement, find the halfway point, line it up where I think I want it, and then we're going to have to run a plumb bob down to make sure we get a straight line. So I use some masking tape to put the tape measure on here. Starts over here, goes all the way around to the other handle, 21 inches. So I'm going to split the difference there I'm going to call it 10 and a half. I put a little mark there, and now we're going to hang a plumb bob. Now, in order for the plumb bob to be accurate, you need to make sure that the piece is level. And you hang it down just on that mark you made. You can see the mark right there. And now if you don't have a plumb bob, you don't actually need a plumb bob. You just need something heavy. Maybe a heavy nut or something tied on the edge of the string. Then you're going to take your marker and you're going to mark the line where it's hanging. As long as it's level, it should be a good mark. Once you have both marks where you want them, and you're pretty confident that it's straight, get yourself a straight edge. And make that line. One thing that's very important before you go ahead and cut this in half. See this ball valve right here? You need to release the pressure. So I like to take a rag and put it over it in case any beer comes out. And use a screwdriver to just push in on that. I already did that once earlier. Obviously it built up some pressure from all the sanding and polishing. Make sure you release that pressure, because if you get a cutting wheel and cut into this with all that pressure, you might be in for a surprise. As we saw earlier, this barrel measures around 49 1/4 as far as the circumference. And I already have this line drawn. And I already measured the distance between the handles, and I already drew that line earlier. Just for a quick reference, 24 3/4. I'm pretty sure that's half of 49 1/4. If my math is correct, it might not be. Anyways, that's a quicker way than running another plumb bob, is just measure down and do the same on the bottom. One thing to note on these beer kegs is this ridge and the very bottom ridge are slightly larger in diameter than the middle ridge. As you can see on this, the line didn't line up exactly. I don't know if we get it in focus here, but it did on the end. So just make sure that when you're measuring, make sure you're measuring from either of those or in the middle. So as you can see, those are the lines that I measured. We got a straight edge to go across the top. However, it's very hard. There's a big gap underneath that. I don't know if you can see. So I bought one of these markers on Amazon, so it's easy to draw the line. We're going to see how that goes. It went pretty well. Not exact, but if I cut it with the wheel pretty straight, it should be good to go. To cut this keg, we're going to use what a lot of people call the death wheel. It's an angle grinder. I got probably less than half a wheel on here. It'll probably burn up pretty quick. Safety, safety. Always wear your glasses. Always wear protective gear, gloves, a mask, a respirator. You don't really want to breathe in that stainless steel as you cut it. So, safety first. If it doesn't have an edge guard on it, I don't recommend using it. A lot of people do, and that's totally fine. But if one of these things shatters, you'll understand why. Make sure you let the pressure out of this keg before you cut into it. A while back, I drew this line on the guard of my angle grinder. If I line that up with the Sharpie line, I get a perfect cut every time. So get yourself some scrap metal and cut a line and see how it works. And if you're really good, when you pick the barrel up and put it on the table and set it down, you can soak your glove with old stale beer. Good stuff. You can see these lines were pretty close. I did have to make some adjustments to get them lined up perfectly because that pen was a little wobbly down there. So in order to do that, I just stuck a piece of tape right where I already cut and matched it up here and drew the line. That way you can see how far off the original one was, and that's where we need to be. This little wheel did a lot of cutting. This is what it looks like when it's new. I like to use the Harbor Freight Warriors. They last actually pretty good for a pretty good deal. I don't know what that bang was. The whiz wheel couldn't reach the final corners, so I had to bust out the old Harbor Freight body saw. I'm glad I could give you a good view of the old bald spot while I was bent over cutting that barrel. It's just a lesson. Make sure you eat your vegetables, kids. Otherwise you're going to lose all your hair. Well, in case any of you ever wondered what the inside of a beer keg looks like, now's your chance to find out. I'll be bringing you in close. I always wondered what the inside of a keg looked like. These edges where I cut need to be cleaned up. They're pretty sharp. So we're going to use another angle grinder with a flat disc. This one's an 80 grit to clean up the edges. I'm on my third battery with this thing. These things are really good if you have a quick job to do, or even like an hour or so, but when you have a lot of work to do, nothing beats the corded angle grinder. Now that we have the keg all cut in half, the two halves don't quite line up. They overlap just a little bit. In order to make that seal, what I did was, as you can see, I set the top half back just a little bit so I have the overlap over here. I'm going to take one of these awesome welding pencils. I'm going to mark the line, and then I'm going to trim it with the whiz wheel. And then I'll do the opposite on the opposite side. As you can see by the pencil line there, there's just a little bit of overlap. And that's mainly because as you cut the barrel in half, you're actually removing just a slight bit of material, about the width of the disc itself. And there's a little warping as well, so we just got to trim that out so it fits good again. back to the flap disc to clean up the edge of the cut. We should be in good shape. I'm pretty happy with that fit. As you can see, that hole is no longer a hole, it's more oval because we had to make the ends meet, but it actually came out pretty good. It's fitting pretty good. We've pretty much used up all of that flap disc, but that's all right. Now we're gonna try and mock up the hinges and see if we can get those welded on. I got the first hinge clamped on here. I got these stainless hinges from the old Amazon, and when I do hinges, when I'm doing a project, something similar to this, I like to put this ridge, I like to split the difference, half up, half below. That way this ends up right in the middle. I didn't measure this, I'm just using the old eyeball 5000, but get you in, it looks pretty good. We're going to bust out the old TIG welder, see what we can do. Before you TIG weld anything, especially stainless or aluminum, you need it really clean. To get it really clean, get it as clean as you can, and then wipe it down with either some acetone, or I found that non-chlorinated brake cleaner works as well. And then you get your TIG torch and you start welding. If you don't know how to TIG weld, don't worry, I don't either. Just kidding. No, I'm not. I don't know how to TIG weld that well. Self-taught. Anyways, I bought these hinges with holes in them, so if you don't have a welder, you can bolt them on. I hope I still remember how to do this. Here goes nothing. That's one tack. There's two. Alright, there's three tacks. I just double checked my placement on the hinge. I like where it's at. I'm going to weld up these three holes. Now for all you welders out there, let me reiterate, I am not a professional welder. And I barely ever get to use this TIG welder. But I'll tell you what, I'm happy with these welds. I have all four corners of this clamped, so everything's in alignment and doesn't move when it gets welded up. Now that that's ready to go, we can start tacking in the top part of the hinges. When TIG welding, you always want to get yourself as comfortable as possible. I got these blocks here to rest my hand on so I can get a nice good weld and I'm not shaking all over the place. Hopefully. Definitely helps if you Put the ground clamp on before you try to weld. Remember that. Starting to take shape. Not too bad. Let's see, in case you guys are wondering what size cooking surface we'll have, looks like we got about 19.5 by about 16 inches. That's good enough for me. I've had this piece of copper tubing probably about 20 years, just collecting dust. I think we're going to try and make the burner out of this. We'll see how that goes. I found that I have one of these tubing benders here. I don't think I've ever used this before, so let's see if we can make a 90-degree bend. Nope, it's starting to kink. Time for plan B. Just so we're all on the same page here, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing as far as making the shape of this burner, or even if I'm going to have enough material to do it. But we'll get it done one way or another. This is what I got so far. I think I'm going to do another smaller square inside, and we'll have 2 feed tubes from the gas bottle, but that's just a guess. I got to finish bending this, and the only way I know how to do this right now is by hand, because I don't want to kink it with that bender again. This is what I've come up with. I was able to figure out kind of how to use this without kinking the line too much. So I got this kind of burner shape. Fits in here pretty good. I'll show you that in a second. Got to drill a ton of little teeny holes for the jets for the propane. Pretty sure that'll cover it. Should give us enough heat. If not, we can always make a new one of those later. Let's hope we don't have to, though. Here's the game plan. I got this bent up just the way I think it's going to work. Let's hope. My game plan now is to, you can see that, there's the 2 ends of the pipe, brass fitting. If I can get these 2 in there, like so, go fire up the torch, braze this connection. Then we can drill all the holes for the jets. We'll see. Okay, we're over here on the bench. Just like with welding or soldering, you want to make sure you got very, very clean surface to join. I myself like to use steel wool. We're going to braze this. We've got to use some flux, and we've got to use the brazing rods. And the reason we're brazing and not soldering is because there's going to be some heat going into this, and the brazing rod melts at a higher temperature than solder will. So hopefully it'll hold. Hopefully I can perfect my brazing skills and get that all filled in. We'll see. Well, I just found out the old acetylene tank is empty, so we're going to try and do it with some MAP gas. Might take a while. We're going to give it a shot. Well, I think we got it. It's not pretty, but I think we got it. I bought this keyboard stand online, fairly inexpensive. I think we're going to end up trying to use that as the base. As you guys know, this is what I have for a burner so far. Got to drill a bunch of jets in there. I bought this setup online. Comes with an adjuster and a burner. I got to figure out how to connect this burner piece over to my burner using a bunch of assorted stuff. The reason I like this assortment is because it has adjustable airflow. So you can dial in how much air you're going to need, because with a custom burner like that, you just don't know. Don't know what you're going to need. I like it. Making a couple of these little plates. Little tabs. Making a couple of these little tabs so I can weld on the fitting. The purpose of these two tabs, so I can weld one on either side of this gas inlet, so I can bolt it up to the bottom of the grill. I was told if you need to weld anything that's been cast steel especially, it needs to be preheated. It doesn't weld the same as mild steel does, so we're going to put a little preheat into this. I was also told that silicone bronze rod is the easiest, well maybe not the easiest, but the best choice to weld cast. So I'm going to do my best. We're going to find out. Those are not pretty welds, but I think they're going to hold, and that's all I care about. Alright, I finally got some acetylene, so I'm going to try and finish brazing up the fittings on the end of this copper. Alright, this is what I've come up with so far. I'm going to drill some holes in that. Adjustable air intake, and the fuel goes in there. And then we'll end up drilling and bolting it to the bottom of the tank, and we can put the propane in there. So I just went out to my gas grill that I got out there currently. I brought my drill bits with me, and the closest one that I had to what the jets are on the grill outside, 5/64, pretty tiny. I also measured the distance in between the jets, and they're about 1/4 of an inch. So I have a lot of marking and drilling to do. I'm going to be here for a while. Still going. Well, there it is, an hour's worth of work. If my calculations are correct, there is 308 jet holes in this 77-inch span. You're welcome to pause the video and count them if you like. If you don't have one of these, I highly suggest you make one. It's a little welding buddy. Got a chunk of weight and a pointer and a couple legs. Use it to hold the workpiece down. Set it on the legs and the weight holds it in place where you need it. Very, very handy, especially with stainless steel because you can't use magnets. I just welded in 4 tabs to hold the burner. So with any luck, I'll just be able to wire those in with some stainless wire just to keep the burner from moving around. And that should hold it. Okay, I temporarily have the burner zip tied into place just to make sure I have enough support. And I needed to mark the hole for where I'm going to drill down through for the gas inlet. Everything looks good.